Learning the Sicho of Shabbos Parshas Emor this week. That year fell out on Chof, 20th of the month of year, and of the year Tavshin Chof Beis 1964. So the pasuk says, Emor Vamarta. You should tell the Jewish, Emor al Kohanim Vamarta Aleim. You should talk to the Kohanim and you should tell them. To Dorshu Razal, our rabbis taught us, Lahazir G'doylim Alaktanim. That we have to warn the of Shimon, which is starting the Sicha, Parshas Emor, Chav Ir, Tavshin Chav Dal. So the pasuk says, Emor al Kohanim, speak to the Kohanim, V'marta aleim, tell them. So it says two times the word talk. It just says, speak to the Kohanim. Why does it have to repeat V'marta aleim? So Darsha is all the rabbis have taught us, L'hazik G'dolim Alaktanim, so that the elders have to watch out for the youngers. Kedisa b'teres Kohanim, as it says in Teres Kohanim, Barichas Yosef b'Gemara, talks about it in the Talmud, Yevamos. V'ad l'psak din b'shulchan Admar Azaken Simin Shin Geshem, as a bracha Geshem rain, but that is Shin Mem Gimel. It's 343. V'nisbar b'izvadish lufneza, and the Rebbe says he spoke about it on Achron Shapesach. She'inin l'hazer g'dolim alaktanim. What does it mean to warn the elders about the youngers? Kechol inyan Torah, like in all things of Torah, yeshna hein. There's the general education. What does it mean to warn the elders on the youngers? It means that you have to tell the elders to educate the youngers. So that's in general, that is a general concept of education. Pratis about the details. What does this mean in general? So that's obvious. Shagdoilim should be Yisrael, the elders of the Jewish people, meaning the ones who are mature. Shekfarnasu b'nei Yud Gimel Shana, that already, the Rebbe says, what is a gadol? A gadol is technically a 13-year-old. Tzrichim lashkiach alaktanim, they have to watch out for the younger ones. It's not just in general, but a Jew as an individual has to be looked after. And he says also, and also this applies to each person as an individual, meaning to say that there's in general that the elders have to look out for the youngers and educate them, and also a person within himself or herself. There's the gadol sheba adam, there's the mature part of the person, koyach haseichel, a person's intellect, that you should have a logical approach to how you do things. That the gadol within you, the elder within you, has to watch over the less mature part of you. And technically, we're talking about the emotional part of a person. A person's emotions can get ahead of them. So your intellect has to look after your lower koiches, your lower strengths, and to guide them. That you shouldn't give in to your instincts. You shouldn't give in to your passions or into your emotional response. Sometimes, it should be guided. Close in the Gadol Talmud. This is what it means, that studying is greater because it brings to action. What does it mean? It brings to action by having information and understanding how you should approach a situation. Is a logical way for a person to guide themselves in life. So the Rebbe says that that the Torah is coming to tell the elders to educate the youngers is talking about in general, and also specifically about an individual within themselves, that you use your stronger strengths to guide your weaker parts. With regard to these two ideas, both idea of in general educating the youngers, and also within yourself having your stronger strengths educate your weaker strengths and guide them, is so it's understood that we could learn from each other, meaning to say that how we educate our younger is how we could learn to educate ourselves, and vice versa. So if in general, even if sometimes two separate subjects could teach, we can learn one thing from the next, or certain ideas from each other. So certainly in a situation where we're talking about whether it's education of yourself or education of others, that we could learn how one should educate themselves and how one should educate others, and vice versa. And the Rebbe says he's going to explain. When the Torah says that, or it's brought down the Medrash to Talmud, that a person that the Torah is coming, what do you mean? What's the simple explanation? That the laws of the Kohen is complicated, complex, right? So a person who's born a Kohen, So a person's born a Kohen, there's a lot of laws that Kohen has to know, especially the laws of purity, impurity, the laws of what he could eat, what he can't eat, tithings, all things, when he could go into the temple, when he could do service. The Kohen has a much larger need for education, especially in temple times, more than a regular Jew. That even every person needs education, but even more so the Kohanim. So therefore, when it comes to the laws of the Kohen, and this week's parsha starts with the laws of the Kohen, the Torah says, Emer v'amarta, that you make sure that the elders, you can't just expect your children to know what to do. You have to educate your children, especially when it comes to the laws of Kohanim. So that's the simple explanation of what the Torah is telling us. But even in general, the idea of educating the youngers or educating yourself. So the Rebbe explains, when it says that the elders are responsible, and the Torah makes them responsible to educate the youngers. What does this mean as in Hey Ariel? To each individual person on themselves, meaning educating yourself. A person's mind and intellect, seichel is the intellect, your mind has to be over your actions. How do you do it's known? We know the rule of thumb is that when your intellect, when your mind lowers itself to apply an education, so to say, to your actions, that you don't just understand concepts, but you act on them. So the mind gets an elevation, because then when a person has an idea, and the idea just stays an idea, so it's an idea. But when your idea, you act on your understanding, so then your idea has purpose. If it stays as an idea, then it doesn't mean anything. So when you have that your seichel, your intellect, guides your actions, then your intellect gets an elevation. Amar Azal, it's brought down, the rabbis teach us, the rule is when a person learns something about a concept, we can't learn from a concept unless we know this is how you're supposed to act. When a person talks, sometimes you learn you go to a class, and the teacher in the class is not teaching in a way of how you should act. It's teaching, I'm giving a Talmud class. And someone says, so what do I do? Okay, what do you do? Open the Shulchan Aruch, open the Code of Law, or ask a Rav. Why does someone say that? Because now we're studying as in a way of study. But you have to know how to act, you have to go to Halach L'Maisa. The Churei movement there says seemingly that idea doesn't make sense. Bir halacha shaykh l'seichel. The halacha means the law, right? So the law is based on your mind, how your mind understands how the law should be according to the rules of the Torah. And the person's intellect, and if you act in it, are very surely two separate things. Not everything you understand you should do. A lot of times, let's say, for instance, a person understands that he shouldn't be smoking. Doesn't necessarily translate. He won't smoke. So if the halacha is the law, just in the seichel, the intellect of the law, why do I have to know how if I act on the law that way? As long as it means the Rebbe is saying that the rule is you look at it, if you want to know what to do, look at a person who does, not a person who studies. Because the person who studies doesn't necessarily mean that you can learn from that person how to do it. So we do halach l'maisa, maisa Rav, right? This is what Rav did. So the same. So the Rebbe is saying why, if the law is based on intellect, why is it important about if the law translated in this individual in action? And as explained in the Maimorim of Tafresh Samach Vav from the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe Rashab explains that when it comes to action, if the person's studying as just a study, so then you're not obligating yourself to come to a conclusion, because it's not important to you to come to a conclusion 100%, because you're not going to act on it anyways. But when a person has to study to know what I should do, so it awakens within the mind certain powers that are only awakened because it's important to how you do. I don't know if the Rebbe is going to say it. I think the Rebbe Rashab over there says the famous example of Shifcha Charufa. A Shifcha Charufa is the law of a female maidservant who's half free and half not free, and she gets engaged and she has relationships outside of her engagement. And there's all these, and the Gemara has all these arguments if she was right, if she's wrong. All these great sages are arguing on her behalf. If she should get lashes, shouldn't get lashes. So the Rebbe Rashab asks a simple question. He says you could imagine the Shifcha Charufa, the simple maidservant, has no idea of all these arguments. She can never argue these arguments because she's too simple. She doesn't have the education to argue. Here you have these great rabbis, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shmuel. How could you expect that this young maidservant is going to know all the arguments to argue? And the Rebbe Rashab says is because to her it's life and death. And when a person's life depends on it, or if she's going to get lashes depends on it, her mind is going to work in charge. Whereas the rabbis are talking as a concept. So the Rebbe continues, Omnam, Gam kasher ena davar negei lamaisa, but sometimes even if a person studies something, we know that very much when a person studies something that's not about yours, right? You study a manual, let's say, right? You have to build, you go to IKEA, and every single nail and screw makes a difference. You put one thing wrong, the shelf won't stand, right? So you have to study the manual properly, or else you're not going to build it right. But if you're studying the manual as a concept, you could skip out ideas. It's not so important to you because you're not building the bookcase anyways. Why do I have to know every detail? So the Rebbe continues, Omnam, kasher ena davar negei lamaisa. But sometimes when it's not important to how you're going to act on it, a person could apply their mind to understand the law, even if they mean it, to understand it 100%. As much as your mind is going to try to understand it as an intellectual study, but because it's not, you're not going to act on the conclusion of it, your mind is not going to work in the kind of charge that it would work if you have to act on it. Right. The Rebbe continues, on page 419. But Befrat specifically, when it comes to how we act in our service of God, when it comes to fear of heaven. When a person has to understand, what should I be doing in my life, in my service of God? So imagine a person is actually, you're not studying Torah to know what the Torah says, what the good book says. Right? You're studying the Torah, so you want to make sure that you don't want to transgress any law that's transgressing the law of the king. Right? You have Yir Shemaim, you have fear of God. And this fear that you don't want to do something wrong, not because you're scared of punishment, because you don't want to disconnect from God. It awakens within the person. That you apply your mind, much more deep, to make sure you know what you're doing in the right way. Till you get to the depth of your seichel. So the Rebbe's point is that when a person has maisa, so seichel, the idea is that the seichel has to guide the intellect of a person, has to guide their emotions, and not just as a concept, but actually you apply it that you're going to act on that. And when you're acting on your understanding of things, it reaches the depth of your mind because it's important to you to know, make sure you get the information right, because it's not just a concept. That's how you're going to behave. Well, the Haragami Maimon results brought down what our rabbis teach us in the Gemara Sanhedrin, which we're going to learn soon, that it talks about King David, right? The Gemara says that what happened, that King David was had some issues that his enemies thought they could take advantage of him, right? So they had Achitophel and he had Doeg, he had the people that thought that they were smart, they were great Talmidei Chacham, great people in Torah study, but they were horrible characters and they were enemies of David. And they thought that because of the story of David and Bathsheba, that God was no longer with David, but they didn't understand that he had his sins, but nevertheless, he was connected to God, even notwithstanding. And because of that, the pasuk says, Vavayi imai, God was always with David, no matter what. Shalach kamaiseh. So they thought they could argue with him, but he had the siyata d'shmaya, he had God's divine watch to make sure that he got to the bottom of the law in the correct way, because it mattered to David. So it says, Vavayi imai, that God was with King David HaMelech, Shalach kamaiseh, the law was like David HaMelech. When is a person, so the Rebbe says in Korinth Chassidus, that what does it mean to get to the root of a law? Is the root of the law goes to the name of Hashem of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, that's beyond the limitations of creations. That's higher than the name Elokim, that's within creation, which is the difference between nature and beyond nature. The power of a miracle comes from the name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, and the power of nature comes from the name of God of Elokim. Adam. What does this mean within the person themselves? When a person reaches deep to the Shem Havaya within you, to the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei within a person. We know that a person has Chachma and Bina. So traditionally in the 10 Sfirot, so the first three are intellectual, but even intellectual is broken up into three categories, Chachma, Bina, Das. So Chachma is the inspiration, and Bina is the understanding. But understanding is a tool that it's very strong. It could break down an inspiration to understand it, but it's only fueled by the chachma. So he says so the idea of Elokim in a person is the bina, the power to understand, to bring it down into practical space. That's why in the name of Hashem, bina is hey, which is a square, which is space. Shuinin havana vasaga, you understand it, you comprehend it. V'shem havaya, what is the name Yud Kei Vav Kei within the person? V'shayir shemakar seichel, it's the source of the intellect. And we know that the rule is something that's higher could reach lower or could fall even lower. That's why Bina, which is in Elikim, is understanding, but it's a concept. But the Yud Kei Vav Kei is the source of the Seichel, and at the source, it's important to the essence of the intellect to be actualized. It means that a lot of people get stuck in the study of something, but if it doesn't matter to you and you have no plans to act on what you understand, so you're only touching the surface of the intellect, because to get to the essence of the intellect, it has to translate into action. So the Rebbe says, and this also in the service of man. You do a Pirsha Adam Razakin, as is known what the Alter Rebbe says, al pasuk on the verse that talks about Avram, our forefather, that Ekev Shema Avram Bekoili, that because this is a verse that God is speaking to his son Yitzchak after the passing of Avram, that God passes the blessings and all the promises of success that his son Yitzchak is going to have. So one of the statements that God tells Yitzchak is why? Ekev, because Shema Avram Bekoili, your father Avram listened to me. Means he was a God-fearing Jew. But the Alter Rebbe says, "She'eating the Shema Avram Bekoili." What does it mean that Avram listened to the voice of God? That the Avram's listening to the voice, he applied it all the way to the heel of his leg. That the heels of Avram, which is the most lifeless part of the body, was permeated with godliness. That his feet only took him to some place holy. His heel wouldn't even consider doing something that was against holiness. Even the heel. This was Avram Avinu's heel. This was Avram Avinu's feet. As is known, that even a heel of a person, and it says that in a person, what is the part of a person? The Gemara says that's the most lifeless part of a person is a person's heel. That even seemingly the most lifeless part of you has to be permeated by the teachings of Chassidus. A Chassidische piata, a Chassidische heel. V'davka chadira, and not just that it has to be permeated. Hey, Sharna, we're on page 419, second page of the Sicha. V'davka hachadira lo yirak b'sichlo midaiseb elegam bi'ikvay, and when a person permeates even their heel with godliness and Chassidus, that's a sign. That is the sign. Ha'ira. Because you want to know, what does God tell Yitzchak? So here, the Alter Rebbe teaches us that the conversation that Avram's having with Yitzchak is not just a promise of that God's going to be good to Yitzchak. It's also an education that God is telling Yitzchak who his father Avram is. Do you want to know who your father was? Your father was so permeated with godliness that it reached all the way to his heels. And only because it reached his heels that's the sign who Avram is. I mean, it's not just that he went as far, that the godliness reached that far to his heels. Because it reached his heels, as it shows who Avram is. Because the godliness permeated not just his mind and his emotions. Also, what's the Akev represent in the person? The Akev represents in the person the lowest of Maisa, the lowest of action. It means emotions, sure I love God, and sure I understand God. I'm not going to walk towards God, right? That's the Akev, that's the heel. The heel is the person that we know that when it comes to Mesiras Nefesh, we're called the generation of the heel, the generation of the Ikva de Mashiach. What's it mean? Just like a heel, if a person wants to go into hot water, right? You don't stick your head into a hot bath first to see if it's hot, right? No one does that. The first thing you stick in is your heel, your foot. If your foot feels that it's hot, or it's cold, or it's warm, or it's pleasant, then you know the rest of your body could go in. The heel has a power that no part of the body has. It does what it's supposed to do. It's Kabbalah soul. It accepts the yoke. So even Avram, that's the sign. You want to know how much, we want to know if Avram really listened to me, is how it permeated his heel. He really understood. And therefore, when you bring something down into action, that's when you get to the essence. When you understand something as a concept, it doesn't mean anything, but it's nothing on the level of when a person actually acts on what they understand. And this is the inner understanding of the statement of the rabbis that says, Gadol Talmud, there's an argument, right? The argument is, what is greater for a person, to study or to do? The Talmud discusses this conversation. And the conclusion is that studying is greater because you can't know what to do if you don't study. right? So, but it doesn't say studying is greater. It says studying is greater because it brings to action. Gadol Talmud shemevi demaisa. Ketzad nasa gadol Talmud. How could you elevate your study? When you act on what you understand and what you know you're supposed to do. Only when you're studying brings to action. That elevates it. So too, when a person's actions elevates your seichel and elevates your intellect. This is all lahazir hagdolim alaktanim. It starts off in the parsha. It says Emor Vamarta, that it says 2 times that the elder Kohanim have to educate the younger Kohanim the laws of kahuna, of priesthood. So the Rebbe says that applies to general education, and it applies to your own education. So we're saying over here that what is our person's own education is that their seichel, their intellect, what they understand in their avodas Hashem, in Torah mitzvahs, has to apply and has to be elevated through their actions. And this is what it means when Rashi says, brings down the medrash that says lahazir g'dolim alaktanim. The word hazir means to warn. That that God is warning that the elders have to educate the youngers. So it says lahazir to warn. It doesn't say to command. There's 2 ways you could say to give over a message. You could tell the elders to warn the youngers what they should and shouldn't do. Or letzavis, give them over from the word letzavat, a commandment or an instruction. Elul it says to warn. Dafka miloshin, and the word hazir also comes from the word zohar, to be bright. V'hirus v'or, which is the one of the main ideas of this week's parsha of Sfiras Omer, the idea of behirus v'or, of brightness. V'cheinu pirush ma'am razal b'may havazor tvei. It says the famous thing. There's the Gemara. There's a Talmud that says, and I think it's Shabbos. Where's the Gemara? Shabbos says it goes into a conversation between different great rabbis' children that they asked him, "What was your father careful in?" Right? There's a lot of commandments, but what was the thing that he was really careful in? So it uses the word not what Zahir Tvei. What was he watchful or what was he warned about within himself? But the reason why it uses the word Zahir, but what lit him up? Where did you see the light of this person? In what mitzvah did you see the light of this person? Should be mitzvah's plainness in this specific mitzvah. That's where we saw the light. Certain people you see, they light up when it comes to tzedakah. They light up when it comes to building a sukkah. They light up when it comes to cleaning up a shul. There's a lot of, they light up when they light the Shabbos candle. There's a certain mitzvah. Everyone does all 630 mitzvahs. But there's certain mitzvahs where you see the person is lit up. This is the mitzvah mamish they connect to. This is to show al tois v'sa'or, because in that mitzvah there's an additional light. That the reason why the Torah chooses to say lahazir g'dolim alaktanim is to say that this is where you light up. You want to know what lights you up. You want to know where you find refinement in your life. It's in education. When you educate yourself and how you behave, your education, your actions is a translate. Your seichel is a way is brought down into your actions. That gives you zohir. That gives you brightness. When you go in to deal with a small part of yourself, right? You have a lot. We all have the child within us, and to educate the child within you, that brings out your light. That brings out your zohir. Page 420. Now the Rebbe says, now that we understand what it means, that within yourself, to educate yourself, now we can understand what it means to have general education, to educate another person. The Rebbe always said, the Rebbe used to say that the previous Rebbe would say, a person is not the age of the passport. You could have a passport age of 10 and be 30. And you could have a passport age of 30 and be 10. So here he says, just like when it comes to within yourself, the gadol, the mature person, and there's the katan, there's the child within you. Befrat nasa gadol. So what happens? The large, the seichel, your mind gets elevated. The way it educates your actions. So too. So too also when it comes to general education of an elder with a younger person. Again, younger doesn't have to be a younger in technical age. This brings out additional light. Lahazir Milashin Zohar Va'ar brings a person, it illuminates the person from within. Eitzel Agdolim, those who spend their time in educating others, Aidei Eshpas Lektanim, when they educate and they give to youngers. Ubagdama, the Rebbe explains. Amr Razal, our rabbis have taught us, I've learned a lot. There's a famous statement that's brought down in 16. It's brought down in the Gemara Tainus. That I learned a lot from my teachers. I learned more from my friends, from my colleagues, than I've learned from my teachers. But who taught me the most was my students. The rabbis teach us, when a student comes to a teacher and says to his teacher, her teacher, teach me Torah. If that person stops what they're doing and teaches the person, both of them get lit up. As it's brought down in Tanya. So what happens over here? The fact is that education, the person who's educating, no matter who you're educating, but if you're educating a person, you're not studying in a chavrusa, but you're educating someone, so it's a yerida. You're lowering. It means in theory you could sit yourself and study on a higher intellectual level and to your own level of knowledge. But when you're educating someone who's on a lower level, it's a yerida. You're lowering yourself. That's only in the spiritual part of the person, that the person is has a less understanding of the topic at hand. Right? You could be teaching a rocket scientist who's in other things much smarter than you and much more educated, but in the topic at hand, he or she's a katan. So even though you're lowering yourself in the koach haseichel and the intellect of the subject at hand, and therefore the elevation and the completion is only in a proportionate way. As it says, the Rebbe says that even when a person, let's read this paragraph again. Even over here, where the elder or the teacher is coming down to the smaller person in this education, it's only a descent that you're lowering yourself a little bit to the person's intellect level, so the person can understand what you're teaching them. So if it's only a small descent, so then its completion that it does within you is also only a small completion. It's only berach, it's only within range. It's only within the spectrum. When it says that I've learned from my students more than everyone, it means I've learned from my rabbis and I learned from my colleagues. My students taught me a little more, but it's all within the same conversation. I learned from my rabbis, I learned from my friends. That's mentioned before. Who taught me the most was my students. But it's within proportion. When it says that's education, like in general to study, but it says to warn the elders on the youngers. The Rebbe is talking about, we're not talking about a person who's a little weaker than you in a subject, right? You go to a shir, so everyone knows how to learn, right? But the person who's teaching knows a little more. So therefore, you've gained a little more by teaching someone who knows a little less. When the Torah is talking about over here, we're not talking about you're teaching someone who you know the subject a bit better. We're talking about pasha children, not just children again in age, but a person who knows very limited. Just this child or this adult child is just starting their education, and just starting to know who God is, B'chlal. Who's God? The person is at such a level, the child has no education, doesn't even know what he's supposed to do, what she's supposed to do. So it's not just that you're teaching them ideas that they didn't know. You're just showing them how to act. The kohen we're talking about in the simple translation, the kohen is a young child. There's tremendous laws of kahuna. You can't become impure. You can't go to the cemetery. You can't go to Levaya. You can't do this. You can't do that. You have to make sure you're pure before you go to the base of Mikdash. There's all the laws of a kohen. The kohen said the child doesn't. It's not like the child knows the laws, but you're tweaking his system. He doesn't know anything. You have to teach him the laws from the beginning. that it's not just to add, but the idea is that you're totally giving an education. And he says now over here we're talking about that is a child, that it'll take a time for the child to reach and even the age where this education is going to come into action, because it's a process. So we're really asking the person to invest in the future of this child. So therefore the person's really putting in their effort for the future, for something that's going to come in a future time. So therefore the yerida, the descent, the investment of the person is on a much higher level, and therefore the elevation is on a much higher level. But the reason is the fishiation. Anytime a person puts an effort, there's reward from Hashem. God doesn't hold back reward from anyone. Especially if a person toils. Avodas parach means hard work. Right? If a person puts in, what does it say? The Gemara say that why did Nebuchadnezzar get 3 generations? He was the destroyer of the temple, right? The first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, who was the king Nebuchadnezzar. And at one point, when they wrote a letter to God, to the king of Yehuda, and he talked about God, they didn't give the proper respect. So he walked 3 steps back to the scribe to tell him to edit the writing. And because of those 3 steps, he had 3 generations of leadership. So we say God doesn't. What's 3 steps? The Rebbe says, "B'frat avor avodas parach," and a person invests effort. Avodas parach is hard effort in their service. It's shahi, top next page. Shahi ba'ofen shal shini harigilis. You go out of your comfort zone, right? The person says, "I'm not. You want me to educate? That's not who I am. I don't. It's hard for me to educate. It's hard for me to put my time into sit down with children and teach them." See, but that's hard. That's effort. What does the Torah say? What's avodas parach? Avodas parach in Mitzrayim wasn't that they were asked to schlep 100 pounds or 200 pounds. Pare was everything was. He was so deep in his corruption and his hate that he would find what was the hardest thing for you to do, right? If a person would rather a whole day sit and work in the field than to have to do sponge, to mop the floor, so he made you mop the floor. Some people would rather carry 100 pounds than to have to sweep. So then he would make you sweep. And the person who liked to sweep and didn't want to do anything in the gardening, that person had to go to the garden. So you go out of your comfort zone. If you're asking a person to stand there with a young child, it's beneath them. It's not even beneath them. It's beneath my time. You have to go out of your comfort zone and what you're accustomed to. The Rebbe is teaching us Chassidim what it means to be a Chassid. If you do a gadol ha'yirida v'tzimtzum shtarchlit eitz l'chacham gadol k'dei l'medim katan. You want a smart person, not to give a shir, but to teach aleph beis to a small child. You're not just teaching you're teaching a first grade Gemara class. You're pasha teaching the child what to do. Put on your tzitzis, wash negelwasser. So therefore the Rebbe says you have to know that the reward for a person making themselves uncomfortable for God, the reward is much greater. When a person does something that they're used to, of course no one goes without getting reward. But when you make yourself uncomfortable for God, so to say, upon him, God was ready to go the extra mile for you as well. This applies to everything in life. If a person is looking for out of the box bracha, usually the solution is when you want to know what should I do something that you're uncomfortable with. A person you stand outside. Let's say a person doesn't like to do mifsayim. It's hard to go out there and stand in the street and ask people if they want to put on film. To stand there in the street and ask women if they want to light Shabbos candles. Right? You're uncomfortable to pride in people's private life. But if you do it anyways, you stand on the street for a few weeks and you go and ask people to light Shabbos candles, that could be the bracha that you need for things to get out of the cycle and to be out of the box. Just an idea. We could explain. We could apply this to the idea that says in Masechet Zavos, have a goyle l'makom Torah. A person should exile themselves to a place of Torah. The Rebbe says that statement in the Pirkei Avos, chapter 4, seemingly is not understood. Why does it have to say exile yourself to a place of Torah? Just should say Hoylach, go to a place of Torah. A person wants to know what should they do. So the Mishnah could have said, go to a place where you could study Torah. Why does it have to, you have to exile yourself there? Why does it have to use extreme language? So the Rebbe says, the idea is, the point the Mishnah is coming to tell you, not just that where you should be. That you have to end up in a place of Torah. The idea is also the process. And the process means you're exiling yourself from your comfort zone. I'm much more comfortable at home with my family, and I can eat supper at home. Why do you want me to go someplace else? It's not just where you are, it's how you get there and where you're leaving. The idea of goyla means exiling yourself from your comfort zone. Get out of your situation, your comfort. You want to really understand, you want to really study, exile yourself from your comfort place. Put yourself in an uncomfortable position, and that will make you a vessel to understand the studying of Torah. Even if it's not logical to do it. When you get out of your space, then you get out of your limitations, get out of your restrictions, get out of the limitations of what you could accomplish. The tradition always was, and I'm sure the Rebbe is talking about for many years, that a person would leave home or leave your comfort place to study. Even if there's a yeshiva, right? You live in Yerushalayim, you wouldn't necessarily study in Yerushalayim and you go somewhere else. You live in New York, you'd study somewhere else. And the Rebbe says, even to go out of your comfort zone, we need a special warning. Like it says, to warn the elders on the youngers. A person may claim, may say, on the contrary, you want me to exile myself? I have a home and I have a comfortable house. I could be in my parents' house. I get supper. That's easier. It's an easier environment for me to study than to go and to be uncomfortable. For me to study properly Torah, I need all the components that are allowed for it. I should have the proper sleeping arrangements and proper food, etc. And now you want me to go to an uncomfortable place where it's not going to be so comfortable. Maybe that's going to interfere with my ability to study. So the Rebbe says, like the Rambam quotes also, the person should be in a comfortable situation. When a person goes on the road, it's confusing. Therefore, the Torah, therefore the Mishnah says no. Exile yourself for Torah. Get out of your comfortable place. Because when you get out of your comfort zone, is only the situation that you're going to be able to get more than you would get if you were just in your limited space. This is the idea that we learned in this week's parsha, that the Emor Varmarta, that you should say that we're telling the person, we're warning the elders to educate the youngers. This is to emphasize. Get out of your regular, your norm. Right? The person, there's a lot of times we say, I could do good things. There's a long list of things I could do for God and for dir b'tachtonim and for birur and for elevating that don't make me uncomfortable. Why do you want me to do things that are specifically uncomfortable? But that's the whole point. By making yourself uncomfortable is when you get out of your space, is when you become a vessel for beyond, to receive much more. This itself, getting uncomfortable, will add more light to your life. A person may think, you're saying I'm going to get more. I'm perfect as I am. I don't need more. But I'd be happy if I could just be the way I am. I could go to Matan Torah. As that comes over here, we tell the person Adrab. On the contrary, only you go out and you put yourself into educating others. That's going to be the recipe for you to have extra light. I'm just going to go a little further. The Rebbe applies this to our generation. This idea that where you want to find your light, go and apply yourself to someone younger, someone beneath you. The Rebbe says, not beneath, no one's beneath anyone, but it's talking beneath in education. So the Rebbe says the ikfus of the Mashiach, this applies mainly to the generation of the heels of Mashiach. When the Mashiach to the last generation of Mashiach, the Talmud teaches us in Sota, which we're learning now, which is the custom, like yesterday's Hayom Yom, to study every day a page of Sota on the days of the Sfira. The Gemara Sota tells us that we don't know what's going on. We think, everything, life is great or not great, whatever it is, but we think everything is the way it is. But we don't understand that in heaven, every day there's the prosecuting angel and writes up long lists of horrible decrees that he wants God to do to the Jewish people or to the world for our actions. We don't even know. And each day the Gemara says, if you thought yesterday's he got easier, yesterday's ideas is nothing compared to how bad he wants to do things today. That's what the Talmud teaches us. The Rebbe says seemingly about this statement in the Talmud is not understood. Why would the Talmud tell us that? That if you think that today could have been bad, wait till you see tomorrow how bad tomorrow could be. You're trying to make people depressed. You're trying to bring anxiety out of people. The Rebbe says you want to make it hard for a person's heart to tell you that I'm going to sleep tonight. If you thought yesterday, you think you survived today, wait till you have challenges tomorrow morning and see what you have waiting for you. So why does the Talmud have to tell us that? The point is, everything about Torah is a lesson. When a person knows that you have to know that if you think that you're going to go to sleep tonight and say, wow, I dealt with the challenges of the world today, but tomorrow's going to be a little easier. I'm not going to have to go out there and even work harder to bring the light of God to the world. So that when you go to sleep at night knowing tomorrow there's going to be more of the dark forces. So you say, what do you mean? So if I have another 5 minutes today, I might as well get ahead of the game, get ahead of the curve, bring more light now. Then you could be stronger tomorrow to fight the dark forces of tomorrow. What is the special strength we need today in the generation of the coming of Mashiach? That we tell the warning that the elders have to educate the youngers. Whether it is to bring your intellect down to apply to your action. We know that as the Alter Rebbe says in Igeres HaKodesh, that our generation, the most important thing is action. It's most important to make sure that we do what we're supposed to do. Also, when it comes to just educating younger people, we know that today there's a lot of people, as much as we're studying, and as much as the world is full of Torah today, in ways that maybe wasn't before, but there's a lot of simple people out there. There's a lot of people that need still education. That when the times of Mashiach, it says the young are going to embarrass the elders. The daughters and the daughter-in-laws are going to rebel against their mothers and mother-in-laws. And so the Rebbe is saying the idea is that this has to apply. So there, I'm just going to go skip to just the first paragraph of Siv Vav because I have to go. We've got literally 1 minute. The Rebbe says, "Vayrami kol hanal." What's the bottom line? So page 423, Vav. Yesh sarach lotzis meragilis. A person has to take away from this talk. Get out of your comfort zone for God. Just like it says that we're warning the elders for the youngers that get out of your comfort zone. By starting off, let your mind just do what you have to do. So get out of your comfort zone within yourself. You shouldn't just study. You have to, what you understand has to translate in action. And this will help a person that you act right now to go do something you're supposed to do. Go out tomorrow morning on Friday and ask someone, if you're Jewish, do you have a mezuzah on your house? Or did you put on film today? Or did you are you going to light Shabbos candles tonight? Help educate those people in their actions of Torah mitzvahs. That will bring light to you. Laila Tov, everyone, and a good Shabbos. We'll be in touch next week. Take care.